You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran Etc., a show that deals with veteran culture and the culture of readjustment. On this episode, a great surprise, a great person that has influenced me and many others, and a contributor towards veteran culture. We're honored to be with Robert John Burke. You've seen him on many different movies as well as TV shows. I would say that the game Kevin Bacon game can be changed to the Robert John Burke game as far as the range of the different movies as well as TV productions that have come out. And not only that, just looking into the life, not of just the actor, but of someone tied to the community, an example for all of us as veterans, and also someone who played with my best friend, Rudy Reyes, in the movie Generation Kill, played one of my favorite generals of all time, General James Mattis. And I'm just proud to have Robert John Burke here. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, hey, Mike, thank you for having me on Veteran, etc. And let me just preface by way of saying I was at an event once with Gene Wu. Gene Wu does VETHACK, and I'll keep this story short. And he wanted us to get up and say something, but I wasn't a veteran and I was very hesitant. But he handed the microphone to this woman who was there to support, and she wasn't a veteran either. I think she was a writer. And she said, and I'll never forget it, she said, I'm not a veteran. She said, I'm a civilian, but we have a lot to learn from you. We have everything to learn from you veterans, from your camaraderie, from your discipline, from what you've seen, from your philosophies. We have so much to learn from you. And then she handed over the mic and I was like, whoa. I always took what this woman said to heart and feel that even in this moment. And so anyway, it's an honor to be here.
Well, I want to also double down on this, on my original introduction, and say, you are a warrior who has influenced me in my veteran readjustment. And though I pretend that I've known you for 20, 30 years and that we met at Purchase at the acting academy that illustriously graduated from, I mean, your illustrious graduation, and I pretend that I was one of your classmates, the reality is your way of life, the warrior way of life, is something that you give to us. And I know that if it's, whether it's Ray up in Connecticut or Gene Wu, who thinks the world of you with VETHACK, where you help, as someone in the community to inspire veteran suicide prevention through the program, you're indirectly influencing our safety and our wellness. And yeah, I just really appreciate your life. And yeah, so I want to get behind why all the discipline, why all the excellence. I mean, your standards are so high that you made my, how could I say it with respecting her, because she's a veteran too, but you made her cry, my sister, on Law and Order And, my sister said that he's just excellent. And that,
Hmm.
when I would come across guys like, when I come across guys like Rudy or my sea daddy, John Wynn Bay, a legendary force Marine reconnaissance man, I just say, superb. This is the superb one. So I want to find out what's behind all that. I'm a psychoanalyst. I'm always curious, and I want to know that so that maybe you could share with people what drives you, what keeps you up at night, what inspires you in the morning, what has kept you into acting, what has led you to be involved in the community with like VETHACK. These are a lot of questions, but as many as you can, please.
Oh, well, that's a very wide range of prospect.
Yeah.
Well, spiri is the root word, Greek. It means breath, inspiration. What breathes life into me? What makes me feel alive?
I'll interrupt you here. Let me
Yes.
interrupt you here, because every time I think I'm going to get Robert Burke, humbled by my Michael J. Kim's philosophy, it's reversed. You teach me. I did not know. That's right. Breath in seminary. Yeah. You're right. Breath. Please go on.
I'll give you just little snippets. When I was a child, we didn't have any money. And I remember, like Kwai Chang Caine almost, I was looking through the window of a karate school, and I would look and I would go home and imitate it. And I mean 9, 10, 11 years old. And the teacher, whose name was Joseph Cabanaro, came out one day and he said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "Oh, no problem." And he said, "Get some of your friends and I'll give you a break on the price." And the price was $5 a week, and we did not have $5 a week. So anyway, one day he came out with a gi and he threw it at me and he said, "Come on, I'll teach you for free." And I was proud and I ran away. And so I'll skip around here. I had a terrible virus. We refer to it as the Irish virus. And when I took the cure, I took the daily cure for that on October 8th of 1984, which will be 38 years ago. So I said to myself, I'm going to train in this type of karate. It's Matsubayashi Shorin-ryu, an inordinate amount of Marines trained in this, because the head dojo was right outside the back gate of Camp Hansen, apparently. And as guys were, is it E-rosing or D-rosing through during Vietnam, they would come back and they would proliferate it here in the United States, as was my experience when I began to train. And I remember training with these guys, former Marines, 90% of them. And when we do ukawaza, arm training and banging, and tears can come out of your eyes. It's quite painful, but I would have a smile on my face. And my teacher once looked and said, he couldn't say, "Mr. Burke, stop smiling." And I wasn't Mr. because I wasn't a Shodan at the time. I wasn't a black belt. He'd say, "Bob, stop, close your mouth." That's what he would say, "Close your mouth." And people would look like, why is this motherfucker? I was so happy to be doing it. In those moments when I felt pain, I felt like I was alive, but it was a different pain than the pain of active alcoholism. Do you know what I mean? At 23 years old, I was almost dead.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? So those two things, sobriety and Shorin-ryu. Shorin-ryu was mental, it was physical, it was emotional, and it was more than anything spiritual. When I would sit in Zazen, that's where the fucking war was. Could I calm my mind? Could I empty my head? No. Took years. And I remember the first time it ever happened, I started to feel like I was floating up, and I came right out of it because I didn't trust it. And just to empty my head, mushin, no mind. We all do it. We can drive 40 miles without thinking of how to operate this car. Well, then you extend that to your life. You're doing your life. The stress comes, let it go. The bills come, okay, we'll take care of them. I have shelter today. I have food today. So when you keep things very simple, that's my program life, my sobriety life, keeping things simple. So both of these paths were entirely complementary. And then ultimately they were complementary to artistry, to acting. Acting I fell into. I'm very happy that I did. I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. I'm the son of immigrants. I'm a sober person. I'm an artist. So it's like all of these little radar dishes, you know, you can filter through these things. And so the artistry, the acting, I'm very critical. Man, I remember when I showed up in Namibia, it was my third time in Namibia, and I was on the chow line at lunch, haven't been giving my utilities, and Rudy was right behind me. And he tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Yo, who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Robert Burke." And he goes, "Who are you playing?" And I said, "I'm playing General James Mattis." And he looked at me, and he looked me up and down, and he said something, I can't remember exactly. He said something complimentary, like, "Well, at least they didn't send us some bullshit motherfucker like this," you know. So
Exactly.
I explained to him I didn't want to play the role because I was younger than General Mattis, and I thought that would be dishonorable. And he said, "Fuck that," like this, you know. So, but then the prospect of getting out there in front of, you know, Benjamin Bush, I think Rudy, Eric, all these guys who were in the book, and playing their commanding general, you know, nobody was shooting at me, Mike. Nobody was shooting at me in anger except me. You know what I mean? So I wanted to do a great job, and you know, you hope that you honor these people by doing it correctly. Now, you know, General Mattis didn't sound like that, and you know, I didn't make any attempt to mimic him, but I did want to embody the spirit of what the Marines instill in young recruits and Marines, and that is, you know, adapt, improvise, and overcome. And that's exactly what's happening on that bridge in Nasiriyah.
And I think,
He's
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
he's, you know, with Colonel Dowdy, and
Yeah.
then having read into that and the pain and the heartache of just that relationship and what happened, transpired there. So anyway,
Yeah.
historically, you just want to do homage to these men who were being fired at in anger. You know what I mean? I don't know what that feeling is, and I never will, and I hope I never will. You
But
know?
the thing about it is that I think people were mostly caught up with the power of your urgency that was a Mattis trait. He is
There's
the warrior monk. That urgency that Mattis is part of his urgency, in the urgency in his persona, even in the book, you know, I mean, which is his call sign, right? Chaos. The thing is that that urgency, you delivered that, you delivered his spirit in the performance. And I think that's what moved a lot of people, because that urgency means care. And I'm going to go into this later to ask you about this, as far as wanting to preserve your own men, that there is a urgency to preserve your own men, to get them through. Just because you're a general, I was ready to curse. Not many even majors pay attention to the responsibility of the urgency to keep your men alive. You delivered that. And I was just wondering, what did it take? What did you use to kind of develop that performance, to make that happen within yourself, to prep yourself for that?
I had discussions with former military, former Marines about the observation and the concept of command presence. Command presence is an abstraction unless you take it off the wall. Command presence to me becomes action. You're not a fucking statue, like oh, look at that statue of Stonewall Jackson. That has command presence. No, it doesn't. It's a statue. Command presence is like gratitude. It's an action. You know, don't tell me you're grateful. Don't feel great. Show me you're grateful. Show me you have command. In the fire service, there's been occasions on the fire ground where I've gotten surly. You know, I see somebody not doing their job or doing their task quickly. You know, we said earlier on, obviously, you know, smooth is fast and fast is slow, and these types of concepts. But sometimes you see just I don't know, malingers and things like that. So I don't suffer that. I've tempered it over the years, I can tell you. But every once in a blue moon, you know, you just kind of get on somebody, and that's what I think what was transpiring there. There was this great fear that the mission is not going to succeed. It's like, let's go, let's go, shit or get off the pot. And the fact ultimately that Mattis relieved Dowdy was just that boy, are you going to be the next colonel who's not going to push? I don't think so. And so, but it was sad. That's the sad, like as a civilian, I said, that's, maybe there was another way around it, but apparently General Mattis didn't see the other way around it. So anyway, certainly discussion of command presence, and then the, you have to mitigate the circumstance. You have to act, and that's what they were paying me to do that day. And, but I just hoped that I was getting it right. You know what I mean? Because boy,
you did.
With the real guys. I mean, imagine somebody like Rudy Reyes. You're a civilian, and you're acting like his command. The ass pucker factor was like the pressure that I put on myself that day to get it right, and that's what, again, you channel that pressure into the performance. The pressure that was on Mattis,
Urgency.
You channel it. Yeah, it's an extreme sense of urgency. This is fucking war, whatever that is. Anyway, not having ever been, remotely in a war. There was another film we did called A Bright Shining Lie that was based on Neil Sheehan's book. And in that book, I got to play a Major Scanlon, who was in the war as an advisor with the South Vietnamese in 1962 and returns to the war as a colonel with John Paul Van. And, this guy actually existed. And you read about these men, and you just want to do right. The way you hold the rifle, the way you wear your uniform, that's the art. That's my job, to get that right. Just as it is their job to, the mission is their job to get it right. So it's my job to just, duplicate that and perform it.
And let me ask you this: you were also part, and I've been affected by this for many years. I spent a lot of time in my research, academic research, looking at World War II and the 92nd Infantry, the role of General Aldman, who, I ended up finding out, Spike Lee, a huge honor on you to have you selected to play General Aldman. Problematic. I actually was somewhat close to his granddaughter, and the thing about it is I ended up finding tapes of General Aldman, like towards the end of his life, and it was just very, very basic, but it seemed as though nothing had happened in Korea or in World War II. And I was just wondering quickly, the experience of one, because you've been involved with so many great movies, Simple Men, like Cannes, Cannes film, presentations about the movies that you've been in, big movies, small movies, all kinds of different projects. And I was just wondering, what was that experience like to work with Spike Lee in his first military movie that the critics were saying in the beginning, well, I wonder how this is going to be, because it's a war movie and he doesn't do war movies. And I just wanted to just get your insights on the whole thing.
Well, they're not very deep. I think that Miracle at St. Anna is a film that will be revisited and exalted. Which war do you want to examine of the African American? The war that they fight every day for equality and to not be treated as secondhand citizens in our own country, or the same war they were fighting in the military, to be not treated as secondhand citizens, to be treated as soldiers. So the fact that he took that on, he's obviously very socially conscious, and lots of times he'll throw things out there that are, fiction, just to get the ball rolling in terms of tearing something apart and examining it. But anytime that man calls me, that, I'm just, we got to do Black Klansman together.
That's right.
And, I was working with Ron Stallworth, who is the Black Klansman himself of Colorado Springs Police Department. And he, his experiences were like unique. You know what I mean? Here's another thing about being an actor. If you're a history buff, and my wife will tell you, like, the minute I get a role that's historically accurate, forget it. I'm reading every damn thing there is out there to read. And that's just a joy when you can come at a role or a character in a time from lots of different angles. And some historians who will tell you, that morning Robert E. Lee ate bacon, and I mean, they know every aspect, and to me it's very rich. It makes history come alive. And then of course, the more accurate your portrayal is, the more that you make the history come alive for others. So
yes, and to push. So I want the audience to know, because the audience may not know too much about the use of acting with the progression to push history either into a positive light or into a negative light, like Birth of a Nation on a negative light that influenced a lot of the horrible Jim Crow laws. But Spike Lee wants to make a movie to advance history regarding the African American military plight, and he chose you to be a part of that. And so what I want to say is that's a huge honor, and that's important to look at. And I also want to ask you, because you spent a lot of time to play at a place that I was close to on a very intimate level, as someone who was receiving services there, and as someone who was a clinician who had a lot of clinical meetings tied to a lot of combat trauma troops at one of the nation's true military veteran facilities, Northport Veteran Hospital in Long Island. I was just wondering if you could just share with some folks here a little bit about that experience, living near the hospital, and just what that hospital represents in many ways to many Long Islanders, veterans.
Well, Mike, I don't want to overspeak or overstate it. We were cognizant of the hospital. It's interesting I think when you have a Veterans Administration hospital in your area, you're not so much as aware of the glory of the war as you are of the reality of the aftermath of the war. My dad retired as a church custodian, and in East Northport, a church named St. Anthony of Padua, and there were an inordinate amount of veterans who would walk up each night from the VA, and a lot of these guys were in various states of mental and emotional struggle, and they were sweethearts to a man, and we would talk to them. My dad would always talk with them and give them $5 or something like this if they needed it. And some guys were really, really, really struggling. You know what I mean? Struggles that they didn't have any control over any longer. This wasn't the days of medication. This was no medication. This was, let's say, the mid 70s to the 80s. And but again, sweethearts. The description shell shocked. Do you know what I mean? A guy who's constantly yelling at you because he thinks that's appropriate, or he's in a hysterical mindset. So everything is going to be, hey, Bobby.
My dad. That's my dad.
He
survived Inchon. So thank you for saying that. Again, something else that you share. I mean, people don't know this, but when I had COVID, and I'll get back to it on this briefly, but Bobby reached out to me and asks me, what I was reading. And I was like, he's the only one who asked me that, who cared. But I just want to say you're very insightful. And so I appreciate you saying that, because that's something personal to me, because that's how he communicates. He's done that for years, decades.
Oh, yeah. I knew a guy named Richie from Harlem, and he was, I don't think I know for a fact, he was at Camp Carroll it was a fire base in Vietnam, and came home with that condition where he would think he was whispering to you, and he was not. He's like, I don't want to even imitate him now, but it was just this hysterical loudness to the voice
Yeah.
that couldn't be controlled or modulated. So anyway, we were aware of the VA.
Mhm.
And even as teenagers and kids and stuff, like, you never disparage those dudes. You know, there were plenty of people to pick on and plenty of this, but you never disparaged a dude from the VA. You know what I mean? Because you just inherently understood that the cost of that must have been pretty high. And so, yeah, they were good guys. They were sweethearts. I can remember them now as I'm speaking to you. You know, they come to the 9 a.m. mass and the noon mass and then the 8 o'clock mass, and they'd hang around and smoke 38 cigarettes and then off home they'd go, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with you. The way you describe this, folks, those are the type of, I got Vietnam veterans that were very similar at the Babylon Vet Center, part of my patient load, that was just brilliant, just incredible people with character. And I'm always grateful. So I wanted you to share that because I had that connection with you as far as with having some links to Northport and Long Island. In regards to veteran readjustment, I know that you are tied, and how we got connected was through VETHACK. And if you could tell some folks like how you got involved with VETHACK.
My fire department, for 14 years, we ran an event called Warrior Appreciation. And we started off with Wounded Warrior, and we switched to Wounded Warrior Project and the bicycle ride. Then we switched again. Now we'll only work with veteran organizations, whereas no one draws a salary. So Gene would be representative in, I can't remember which organization, but Gene came out and a couple of other Marines from New York, and we just hit it off. You know, we just started talking and stuff. And then he, you know, generated VETHACK. And, you know, you can house a soldier, or you can, you know, help him with this and help him with that. But if he doesn't have his very life, you know, and I didn't see a lot of people wanting to be involved with suicide. You know, there's a passage I once read that says both God and nature abhor suicide, you know, and that always stuck with me. And I thought, when we were marching one time and he asked me to speak, I said, you know, it's an unspeakable act, and that's the problem. No one's speaking about it. But you have Gene Wu here, who's a Marine, and he's speaking about it. So I was so in awe, and I was so respectful of his willingness to continue the mission for his brother Marines and sister Marines, that how could not, you know, if the guy asked me to do anything, I would do anything. And all he was asking me to do was show up, you know what I mean? To be present. In our country, we have no royalty, and sometimes fucking actors are treated that way, which is complete nonsense. But I think that's some of the, you know, the draw. And let it be, who cares? But anyway, I was always just enamored to be around these guys, not having served. So funny, so brilliant, with so much to offer, and having to negotiate and navigate the return to civilian life. When you, in a Gestaltian way, when you you have to sit down with these things, with so many things in life, and put yourself in that person's shoe. Mm-hmm. Sit there and really close your eyes and think about having, you know, been giving orders and having this really intense compressed life and combat, and now you're just Joe who lives at 38, you know, Smith Street. That's a huge chasm there. And so I thought, you know, especially in modern warfare, when nothing's supposed to happen, right? Nobody gets, you know. So anyway, I would think about that and think anything I could do for Gene and his organization, I would.
Yeah, that's something that you just said, you know, and it leads me to because, you know, in a rhizomatic way, you know, as far as with the roots coming together with all these different projects that help each other and support each other. You were involved in the incredible hit series, an informative series. Actually, if those people who are aspiring to pursue a career in trauma therapy, I would say checking out the show Rescue Me would be a great show to check out because we learn different things in different ways. And I was just wondering, as far as, first responders, whether you're a Marine, you're fireman, you're police officer, medical, like there, it's a heavy load. And I was just wondering, what are some things that you could share with the audience that would be some wellness, just because the way I look at your life and I respect it immensely. What could you tell the audience, if they're bunkered down like me, and going through readjustment? I've made a lot of strides, but what are just a couple of things for self-care that could be useful? Because you've been around in different levels, and I like to I ask this to a lot of my guests.
Well, my whole life is predicated on self-care and a daily reprieve from alcohol.
Mm.
Self-care, it should start with the basics, with food.
Mm.
I'm going to be 62 years old and I'm just getting a handle on sugar. I've stopped smoking cigarettes. Thomas Merton, in his book, The Seeds of Contemplation, says in the opening of a chapter on despair, he said, "It is the rotten luxury of turning your back on what you know works." So you will have despair if you're sitting on your ass and 20 sit-ups and 20 push-ups and going for a bike ride, that'll change your mood. But if you don't take that action, then you will know despair. So it's simple arithmetic. Don't turn your back on what you know works, and keep it really simple. It's a cinch by the inch. It's hard by the yard. This is 2022. If you're not getting inspiration from some avenue in life, with this goddamn phone and internet and social media, the ship is kind of turning for me anyway. It's like there's a lot of really good stuff out there. I can't think of who to keep up with in terms of workout and stuff like this. You said Marine and first responder. This was my best friend. His name was Captain Patrick Brown. He was the room I'm sitting in. Ooh,
yeah,
that's Patty. The room I'm sitting in used to be his room. It's now like a kind of an office in my house. And Pat was a two-tour Vietnam veteran, Silver Star winner. On 9/11, he was the most decorated firefighter working that day. So my fire service started. I didn't know it started, but with his brother Michael, we went to the site of the World Trade Center, and then we looked for Pat over the course of however many days. It was 100 hours that both of us did. Michael, his brother, who was a former city fireman, became an emergency medicine physician, practiced for 30 years, retired out of Nellis Air Force Base, and succumbed to 9/11 prostate, vicious metastatic cancer, and passed away on October 30th of 2020. So anyway, as homage to Pat, I joined the fire service in my town. Pat once said to me, he goes, "Who puts out the fires out?" I said, "Oh, Jim and Joe and John, and then after 9/11, I thought, well, why not me? And so that's how I got into it. I'm a first generation Irish from Washington Heights. I should have been a fireman. It was my birthright, but I like it. I really like the discipline, the camaraderie. I was challenged at the beginning mechanically, but I stay within my lane. You know what I mean? I'm not pumping the truck at 1 o'clock in the morning with 4 houses on fire. I'm not the guy you want doing that. I'll break windows and get a line in there really quick, but I'm not the guy you want pumping the truck. There's a lot of guys out there who identify with that, I think, too.
Is that how you say this in a humble way, but you're a captain of
I just actually July 4th stepped aside as captain after 12 years. There's this really great young guy in the department now, and I just wanted to get a spot for him, and so he's a captain now. There can only be 4 captains in our house, And so he's just terrific. This kid's just a complete home run. But he couldn't become a captain unless somebody stepped aside. So I was the senior captain and I stepped aside. It's no big deal. I love being a black helmet again. The young guys, you got to kind of keep them. You want to train them up and drill them up and make them as sharp as you can, but you don't want to alienate them, And I don't mean mamby-pamby snowflake, oh, you're soft. No. It's a lot to ask young people these days. The days of Jimmy showing you what to do are over. It's OSHA, FEMA, Homeland Security, PESH. It's stacked, layered certification, recertificate. It's endless, and it's turning a lot of young people off. So I'm in the back of the truck now, and I'm just trying to keep everybody happy. Like, Joe, you did a great job. Just real positive reinforcement. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with it. There's a couple of different ways to go after and keep people. And I'm trying positive reinforcement these days. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, you remind me of the Vietnam vets in the Marine Corps who were, I remember there was this guy, he was a real cowboy, from like Bakersfield, California. And I just thought he was just going to run me to the ground, and he had all these scars and stuff. So I assumed he was a staff sergeant. So I knew the Marine Corps was just keeping him so he could get his 20 years, and he just did whatever he wanted. And, but I learned a lot from him. He was like you said in the back, but he was, teaching me things I didn't know. He was kind of like a very indirect, Mr. Miyagi figure. And, I got my highest rating of 4,949 from him. I thought, I thought that guy's going to be a cowboy redneck. He's not going to, and it was, you say that and it touches me and brings me back to that experience.
I want to go back to one of your questions about what I do for, self-care and stuff like that. And, I don't ever presume to speak to a veteran on any ground that is equal, but as a human to another human, just in terms of substance abuse, I've been there and I know very, very intimately that the help is out there. You know what I mean? And, there's a Shakespeare, I can't remember Richard III, but he says, I spy a far off shore where I would tread, and I curse the sea that keeps me from that shore. So like, you want to be sober, you want to have a good life, God damn it. You want to get out of this, but you just can't get there. It just seems too far away, and it's not.
I saw my kid, and that's what got me closer. So you're right.
Yeah, it's just
I knew I had to do it.
Yeah, baby steps.
My whole life,
Baby steps. 38 years later, I'm taking baby steps. I have a little book here. I read a little daily thing. I have another book here. I have like all of my little books, and then I have my brothers, who I call, and the it's not camaraderie, it's a fellowship. And so for any veteran out there who's struggling, actually there's the best meetings I've ever been at we're at 23rd Street upstairs at the VA. My friend Jimmy used to bring the meeting in there. He was a retired fire captain from the city, and boy, the medicine is big, you know what I mean? And it doesn't come in no cup. It's just love and trust and a lot of courage, and the courage has to come from something greater than yourself. And it's a great journey. You're in the front row of what you'll be introduced to you for the first time, and you strap in and you have this life, and it can be done. And it again, it's just like little baby steps every day.
Yeah. You say that and I'm brought to Northport again, VA hospital. Vets Over the Horizon, the legendary veteran AA hybrid war trauma group that I saw miracles come out of that group.
They used to come down in the van to the meeting down in the town, like every Wednesday night. It was a big men's meeting down there. I'd never lived up there
that's right.
after school.
Mhm.
But I would go to meetings up there and I would see these guys, and, you know,
Yeah.
they had a lot more to say. They had a lot more experience in life. They had seen things that none of us collectively would ever see. And to me, not in a perverse way, but in a growth kind of way, that's going back to what I said when we first started, that we have so much to learn
Yeah.
from veterans and from their journey. And we'll never along the way will you would not be able to learn from a veteran. These guys who came back from World War II and didn't speak about it, tremendous disservice. You know what I mean? And you know, that was the humility, I suppose, of the day, but it was also super unhealthy. But you know, that was the generation. Gosh, you think about all those guys and what they saw, and you know, just went out back to farming or whatever they were doing, and their lives as businessmen or policemen or whatever they were. But certainly now these days, you know, it's interesting in the fire service, if I can make this reach of an analogy, what burns in the home these days is plastic. In the old days, it was cloth and wood, and wasn't terribly toxic. You know, you could breathe that stuff. You know, hey, the captain took a good feed. You know, that's was the expression for breathing smoke. But nowadays, the fire load, what's actually burning, is toxic. The rafters are made of glue, and the gusset plates and they fail in 2 seconds flat. But like this table and these windows, everything's plastic. So it's a lot more dangerous. And so too, like war, what our veterans now see is just a lot heightened and vicious and just mind blowing. So to be able to go someplace safe and share about that and speak about substance abuse or alcohol abuse is, you know, listen, it's out there.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because when I got COVID, you were one of the few people who reached out, and you just asked me, like my classmates at Yale, what are you reading? You know,
Uh,
and that blew my mind. So now I'm asking you, one, what are you reading? And what would you say are three, considering everything that you spoke about the show, what are like three great books that, you know, you could share with us that you found to be pretty helpful to you?
oh
Or
gosh, there have been so many. That's a really difficult question. I remember my favorite book. My favorite book as a kid was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And I remember just never being moved when Mrs. Havisham says to, what the hell's her name? To the girl, she says, break his heart.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, don't break his heart. That's Pip, man. Pip is,
Yeah.
and I remember being so like moved by that. Like, how could this writer have sucked me into, you know, 18th century Britain? But there are a lot of books. I mean, gosh, I don't know. You know, biographies have been great. Very difficult question to answer. But I mostly read histories,
Yep.
historical biographies. I like Mesoamerica. Fascinated by Mesoamerica and Mesoamerican architecture. It's so funny when I'm reading a book. I was just talking about this the other day. I was on a plane and I was reading Soldiers Once and Young 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever it came out. And I left the last 30 pages for this flight that I was taking. And I read it and I closed the book and I said, wow, what a book. And as we're getting off the plane, somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and it was Joe Galloway, the writer. And he says, did you enjoy the book? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, did you serve, son? I said, no, I didn't. I said, but it was a great book. Wow, the gallantry and you know, he was there. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I was reading this book on Mesoamerica and in LAX, and I bump into Graham Hancock. I mean, we like literally bumped into each other. I was like, dude, I'm reading your book, right? And I showed him, we took a picture together. So I've been able to meet a lot of authors that way. A few more I can't think of at the moment.
You've given a lot, you know, and I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I guess that was a selfish question, because I don't get to see you much, and
Yeah.
your rich intellectual quest.
God, I have a couple of nuns that would have disagreed with you
Well,
50
that was
some odd
it.
years ago.
Yeah, but I'm always curious. Is like, I'm up. I'm sure he's up. I wonder what the fuck he's reading. Excuse my language, but next time I'll just text you. You know,
Well, you know,
I'm up.
you're a very unique guy yourself, Mike, and I'm very aware of that. and drawn to it and respect it. There's a saying in my program where it is based on attraction rather than promotion, and you are not promoting, certainly, but what you do sends out, prana, and so just your intellect, your that will, that life force that asks you to ask yourself, what are these questions, what are these answers, to have enriched your journey so much, it enriches ours. You say, oh, I'm bunkered down and I don't. Well, you're certainly not bunkered down in this medium. Do you know what I mean? What you're doing is the exact opposite. You're reaching out, and I think that's a tremendous service. You're another guy. The mission continues. I don't know what it is about this pack of dudes between yourself and Rudy and Gene and these guys. You're in this continuum of healthily and productively and constructively helping each other. And it was like whoever your drill instructors were would be proud of you, I believe, because you never, you keep lifting the flag on the field, no matter if, for your brothers and sisters. So it's tremendous. It's tremendous.
Thank you for saying that. And two things, because I know you've got probably a looming emergency call coming, but from the fire department. But I was wondering a possibility because of different things that you've gone through. But so here's the thing. If you're a veteran coming back in the Marine Corps, you could, and in the other, I was in other branches of services, other branches. And I would actually say I'm humbled for the short time I spent in the Marine Corps. I actually spent more time as a Coast Guard officer and in the Army in Iraq, and that was great. But I connect with the Marine Corps because that was my first service and my birth, and it built my character. My parents abandoned me as a kid, but they did it out of love because my mom had cancer and they had to travel and they couldn't afford to keep me. But a white redneck Kentucky family looked after me, and that's where I learned. I learned how to love. I also learned how to be tough. I guess when I think of you, and if you could share this, because I've seen this in your movies, I've seen this. Like I said, my sister was so influenced by that role in Law and Order. Is this? Can you say something a little bit about that role, because it got a lot of attention, and you could even find it on YouTube. Can you tell the audience a little bit about it, because it's just a powerful role, but it's going to be connected to what I'm going to be asking you.
I think it's Ed Tucker, and
Ed Tucker,
he takes his life.
Yes,
and they
he's
came
dying,
to me.
Right?
Yeah, they came to me and they asked me if I'm going to be killed, and I said okay. And it was long story. It was like, well, you can't kill me if I don't show up to work. So I'm do I agree to this? So I said I'll agree to that, but I would like it to have a 9/11 element, and I would like, at that time, I think 3 or 4 New York City police officers had taken their life within the span of 8 weeks. It was a couple of years ago. It was like 4 years ago, and it was just this rash. And I said, we want to speak to that. And I said, and then I demand that if I'm going to do this, you're going to put a rider at the end of the episode for where police officers can get help, and then we're just going to further the cause in terms of there's no disparagement or price you pay for coming forward. Let these police officers take their health insurance and go seek other, rather than the house shrink that's going to get you fucked, and by the department. So anyway, we did it. My character was supposed to have worked at the landfill in Staten Island, sifting through debris, and I had a very close friend who was a detective who did that and came down with a cancer where they strapped him to the bed and fed him interleukin-2 chemo, which makes you unrecognizable. He had 16 operations, a 20-pound tumor removed, his elbow removed, his pinky removed. He returned to the line of duty. He was subsequently written up for the Theodore Roosevelt Medal. That officer who returns to the line of duty in lieu of overcoming great illness, and he was the police commissioner's driver at that time. And the night he was awarded that, it was his mother, his wife, his partner, and myself at the table. we were pretty close, and we still are. And so when you're doing an acting role like that, you better get it right. You know what I mean? As homage. It's this is some abstract person I was playing. This is like a dear friend of mine whose brother was killed in a fire. You know, his brother was a Marine Corps sniper, Peter McLaughlin. He was killed in a fire October 8th, 1996, an arson fire out of Rescue 4 in Queens. So these are the guys that I was around, that grew up with, and you know, they went into the police service, fire service, Marine Corps, and maybe specifically for myself and some other actors or artists, knowing people like that, you just want to get it really super accurate. Then there's the way you look physically. You know, they call it typecasting. I don't think there's anything wrong with typecasting because it says you're working. But that role of Tucker, he was the internal affairs guy for years. You know, he's the ball breaker, the guy who comes in and goes after bad cops. And I was only too happy to play that guy because it's fun. You don't want to play the good guy. The guy's boring. You want to come in and play the guy who rattles everybody's cage because it's more dramatic. And then Mariska Hargitay, who's unbelievable, she said, "You're going to be my love interest." And I was like, whoa, that's not going to work. And we did that for a couple of years. And then they came to me and said, Ed Tucker is going to be, you know, leaving the story. And I had been in the story, I think, for 14 or 16 years. You know, they were always really cool to me and let me play this guy the way I interpreted him. And so, yeah, that was that role. But I think just in terms of the suicide, he developed brain cancer from working on 9/11, sifting through, and the writing was real good. Peter Blonner was the guy who wrote the episode. The writing was very accurate. We talked about that. And so rather than burden his new wife and everything, he waited until his pension cleared and he took his life. And, you know, the sadness, so as artists, as actors, as writers, what you try and do responsibly is hold the mirror up to society and say, look, this is you. Is this acceptable or is this unacceptable? You try not to comment on it yourself, but you do try and, you know, one of your tasks is to hold the mirror up accurately. And that's what was happening in those days. 4 or 5 years ago, there was just this incident, one after the other. It was just really unacceptable. So
yeah, and so that is something that leads me to say, how have you, that's what I'm going to ask, how have you been able to balance being like I said, you know, I'm going to do one of those ballot, like Hollywood Steve McQueen, Robert Burke. How can you have that consistent kind of, you know, just a warrior's mentality, warrior disposition, but at the same time also exude authenticity and empathy? Because I think a lot of veterans can struggle with that. But I've seen you, I mean, the way you've touched me is seeing that. And you know, part of the show involves, you know, talking about what are the inner workings to always become better, because we always learn from the Oprah show or Eckhart Tolle and all that, you know. And I'm just wondering, this is a very good a good alchemy of, you know, of positive masculinity as well as just being human. And I was just wondering how yeah, what is that all about, man?
Lots of different elements there in your query. I think you said, you know, something about toxic masculinity. That's a hilarious expression. You know, it's very hard for men in modern society to be men. Quite simply, what keeps me going, the benefit of having trained in karate with men who, it's like I've heard said, and a guy said it to me in karate class one night. I was doing sit-ups and I had just plastered a ceiling all day. I was doing construction. I was fucking exhausted. And he leaned down and he kind of whispered to me. He said, "I think you feeling sorry for yourself." And it was like, you know, it was like Buddha. exploded the myth and the self-pity I had. But he was exactly right. Nobody knew what poor Bob was going through. And nobody gave a shit. Today I'm 61, I'll be 62 next month. I said, why should I go out and fucking work out today? Why should I lift today? What difference does it make? Let me just take the day off. Mushin, no mind. Shut it off and just walked out there and put the gloves on and started going. And all of a sudden, the first couple of reps suck, and then the next one sucks. And then, if you can just shut your mind off, what I mean? That's why like meditation is a great tool. It's a tool. It's like a tool. If I want to dig a hole, I get a fucking shovel. If I want to do life, I have to empty the cup. You know what I mean? And so, it's like anything else, these guys, McCraven, and, make your bed. But again, moving your body, you know what I mean? It's key, it's central. And then feeding your body, I fucking loved Lucky Charms when I was a kid, and Twinkies and all sorts of shit. And I'm shocked now if one of my sons eats something like that. I'm like, dude, really? They're like, are you kidding me? You grew up in the Mayan Empire. You were shoving this stuff up your ass. But now it's so late in life that I'm coming to the appreciation of just taking care. The body is my temple, and I disparage myself for not having started sooner. Never fashioned myself as a workout guy. Never saw myself in my own image as a martial artist. When I first wore a black belt, I felt like a complete imposter. When my teacher handed me the belt, he looked at me, he said, if you work hard, someday you'll deserve this. And that made sense to me, the fact that as a Shodan, as a first degree, now I was considered a serious student. And all the humility and the humility and the humility. It took me 6 years to achieve black belt because I think they just forgot about me. You know what I mean? It was called a Kamawan Dojo, means I don't care. The Kama and the Wan together in the window means I don't care. And so they broke away from a black belt, and they were just training. They were just 30 black belts who were training. And that's how I fell in. I keep going back to that. I don't train as much. I don't train in the dojo any longer.
But it's your mind.
Oh, it's your mind is always, So this style, this emotional style, it speaks to me. It works with me. I think it's complementary with who I am. It sets up rails that I bang off of. Do you know what I mean? And lots of times I say, hey, free up, relax, loosen up. But I like the rigidity. I like the push. I like pushing against it. I wish I had started sooner. I don't know.
There's a very human side to you. You're not an asshole actor, and then you give back to the community. So what's that all about? So you have that, but then
that's my upbringing.
Okay.
That's being the product of two Irish immigrants with not much education who were farmers, who understood that you, Mike, you're important, not your car, your house, your job. None of that means anything. My parents were always attracted. You could tell my mother that you were from Kuzmekistania, and she'd always say the same thing. She goes, I understand, they're wonderful people. It was like, she was always given over to the human, to the humanity. So it's genetic in me, I think, that attraction to the human spirit rather than anything else. Do you know what I mean? I think it's genetic. It's the way I was brought up. I was brought up very religious. That didn't, it was good in one way to make me question things, to make me really question things, and actually to give me resolve in terms of certain things I determined, having read extensively about the Vatican through the years, through all of the popes. Boy, if you want a story, it's there. But anyway, theology was always, I was always just complete, because we lived it. We lived, the church was here. Attached to the church was the rectory, and attached to the rectory was my house. And our house was the surface area of three cars, because we lived above a 3-car garage. That was the size of our house. And so when you speak about, Robert Burke seems like a good guy and a humble guy and all this kind of, these observations, I just hearken back to my father with his foot in my ass going, you don't act like you're anything special to anybody. you're no greater or no worse than any man. And that's the way he was. You know what I mean? He didn't look down at anybody, and he didn't really look up to anybody either. He looked up to Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
That became a point of contention. If you were a 6'4", 275 white Irishman who worked on the docks, you were not not in the tribe on that regard. But no, he was a very beautiful man.
It sounds like I would love to have met him. I just it gives me chills just hearing about him. Let me ask you this. Last words. I want people to know more about you. How can they learn more about you? And if you have anything else to share, please share. But I just want folks to know more about you.
If you're a person or a veteran and you seek help, then you must give it. So if you're doing okay, you're this veteran and you're an executive, and I always thought about working in a food bank, but I don't know if they want me, and I don't know if I should go in. Do it. Do you know what I mean? Always take the risk of helping somebody else. Stop with the, oh, maybe they, I'm just one person, and it's not going to make any fucking difference at all. If you want to know who I am, I'm the guy who's like, I have a lot of fears, but I do it anyway. I'll tell you, this guy, I'll show it to you again, Pat Brown, and I wear his bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
I was I wasn't young. I was 41 years old when I came out of the fire academy, and we had our first fire, working structure fire, and I pushed down the hall. I was on the nozzle, and just before I pushed, I was starting to feel like the heat on my ears and my wrists, my neck. And I was like, and I remember the thought I had was, holy shit, I did not sign on for this. And his voice came to me and it said, this is exactly what you signed on for. And I remember like, uh-oh, now I got to do this, Down the hall we went, operated on 2 rooms, only did what we were trained to do, and it worked perfectly. So then when COVID happened and they're like, oh, yeah, your ambulance response is okay, you're going to be first round for vaccination. I was like, what? Me? I'm a fucking actor, like what? And they said, no, because I drive for EMS, not so much anymore. But I remember going, I don't want to drive COVID patients. I didn't sign on for this. And it was this guy again telling me, this is exactly what you signed on for. So if you want to know a little bit about me, it's like, when I said to my father, I'm going to be an actor, all my sisters were in medicine and my brother's in medicine. And he said 3 famous words that I tell. He said, a fucking what? And I said, an actor. And he goes, we don't do that. We don't even know anybody who does that. Is that something that a man does? And then it was like, Mary, come in here. He's talking crazy. He didn't know. He had no point of reference at all to understand that this is kind of something, we got over that. But so to leap, make that leap of faith,
Yes.
grab that brother or sister, like things like writing on the mirror, like be kind today. It's like, I do shit like that. I was going to a fire department meeting a couple of weeks ago. And I was thinking, be kind to people, like really, like make it. And I got in there and everybody had a grenade with a pin pulled. And I was like, oh no, like this wrong day for those affirmations. But yeah, it's just, like see what's going to happen. I was given a second chance, Mike, with substance abuse. Okay. So God, or the grace of the universe, the vibration of the universe said, you little puff of vapor, we're going to give you a second chance. So that was a gift. And so what I do with my life is the gift back to the universe. It's a reciprocal kind of karmic, endeavor. And I don't mean bullshit, esoteric nonsense. I mean, this is,
I feel you. I feel
this
you.
This is quantum physics, baby. As far as I'm concerned, this is simple math. I've seen it time and time again, and I know you're the same way. I listened to your talking, and I said, this guy, if you hang on like a roller coaster ride, this guy makes all the sense in the world. Very Leonard says, very not dense, but you have to listen carefully so that you'll be able to hear. So
Yeah, and I wanted to have vets hearing all this and vet allies this because it's very practical. I had experienced that second chance as well. And so it touches me that you say that it's very real. So if there's anyone listening out there that you're thinking about your life, recognize you might be on that second chance, but you need to be aware as the different things that Robert has said. Wake up in that, as Anthony DeMello with wake up, wake up, wake up. And that's, I've woken up through this time here. Thank you. I could speak to you forever and I want you back on. I'm wondering, how can you tell folks so can they find your latest projects and all that? Like, how could they tap onto some of that on social media or?
Like I think the last time I posted was like in March or something. I'm not a big.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a film called The Boston Strangler. It's a remake with Keira Knightley, Chris Cooper, Carrie Coon, really strong actors.
Okay.
That's coming out next year.
Here?
I did this little film. I hope I'm in it. I think I am, called Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. And you can never find out if you're actually in it, but Marvel allowed me contractually to say, yes, I'm appearing in it. So I don't know. I know what I shot. I know who the character was, but I don't know what made it to the screen. So that was another, massive blessing. But I have to wait and see, how much of it, the performance made it to the screen.
But keep your eyes out for Robert John Burke, and recognize he's also been in the Spielberg movies that you were tied to. Like, I mean, there's just like the range of the different movies that you
see. That's, my mother used to say one thing in her little Irish accent. She said, is it going to be a good movie? And I tell her, Mom, we make the good ones the same way as we make the bad ones. But the thing about my working as an actor is the autonomy. Nobody cares what I do. So you know what? I swim in the middle, and it's a great place. Heavy is the head that wears the crown in show business. And there's a lot of exterior determinants that shape people, just fucking nonsense. So I never had to get trapped in any of that. I show up, I do my job, I pinch myself. I say to this universe, if it is your will that I should continue doing this, I'll be okay with that, I think. So yeah, just very lucky. Always been blessed.
I connect with you on that because in boot camp, that's what I wasn't striving to be honor man. I wasn't striving to be the dirtbag, but like you said, the middle, and then when you graduate, you're still remembered, and it's the beginning to other things. But the middle path, as Aristotle was saying, the middle path.
I think that's where I found truly and realistically that I could be effective. There are certain things, sure, I can excel at. Not too many, but certainly being a worker among workers and just doing your job and doing it as well as you can do it, showing up early, and being grateful. Those are things I can achieve. So that's where my lane is, and it's worked out today.
Well, thank you very much for your presence here on Veteran, etc. Robert John Burke, look him up, Google him, just incredible. I know we will see more of him here, and I really appreciate him taking the time. Thank you very much, John.
Just a total honor. A total honor, Mike. Thank you, buddy.
Mr. Burke, sir. I still see you as Mattis.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.